if it's okay with yourselves and if it's okay with Ian, I'm going to just put up or ask Ian to put up the starter slide and get us starting on the PowerPoint slides for this evening. This slide was actually came about through a conversation on a walk around the block where I first met Dave Cargill, and then through email contact with Nick as regards the way in which the presentation could be developed for this evening. So the title of my presentation this evening is Volunteering Makes a World of Difference, and I hope that the combination of photographs on this particular slide make us all sure that we are in the Radyr Morganstown Association session on Monday the 16th of August 2021, and that the images there show a variety of different people volunteering, undertaking a fun run, or maybe it's a marathon, and probably raising funds for charities in the process, and also some bunting to indicate some of the fun that can hopefully come when people are volunteering and enjoying themselves. And certainly when I received our copy of the Radyr Chain magazine put through our door a couple of days ago, I think there was bunting there highlighted, linked to the RMA Festival, which I will make reference to later on. So moving on to my next slide, this just details the range of things that I'm going to cover this evening. I'm going to try and briefly set the context of the voluntary sector in Wales. And then after that, I'll try and bring us right into the Radyr and Morganstown area with just some headline information, and then move us into a discussion around some of the opportunities and challenges that people involved in charities and community groups around Wales have been talking to me about over the past year or so. I'm going to then move us on to talk about what about the future, and maybe a call to action to all of us. And then, as I say, hopefully in around about 20 minutes or so time, having a bit of discussion with people who are in this evening's meeting. So those are the areas that I'm going to cover this evening, and we'll move swiftly on to the context in Wales. Thank you, Ian. So the latest information that WCVA, the organisation I lead, has got access to indicates that there are 49,000 voluntary organisations currently active in Wales. Of those, just over 6,500 are registered charities. That is registered with the Charity Commission for England and Wales. And those of you who might be better at arithmetic than me will then work out that that means that there are an awful lot of voluntary and community organisations that are active in their local areas, active across Wales, maybe active across the whole of Great Britain, UK, or further afield, that are not registered charities. And I will touch on that a little bit more in a moment. But voluntary activity has always been the bedrock of communities across Wales. And again, the latest data that WCVA has access to indicates that there are over 1 million people who identify themselves as regularly volunteering their time to causes that they're passionate about in Wales. And the other point that I wanted to make as regards information that's relevant to Wales is that the Welsh Government, when established in 1999, was the first one in the UK, and at this moment in time is still, in my view, unfortunately, the only one in the UK that has got a third sector scheme, a set of relationships with the third sector enshrined in the Government of Wales Act to formalise the arrangements between Welsh Government and the voluntary and community sector. All my colleagues that I link with across England, Scotland and Northern Ireland are all very jealous of that third sector scheme, and possibly later on we'll be able to touch on some of the benefits that that scheme and that those arrangements have for the voluntary and community sector in Wales. The link there is to WCVA, the charity that I lead, Wales Council for Voluntary Action, and it's our role, as David said, to promote volunteering, to support the third sector, to consider issues of sustainability, and that does not just equal money, and to also promote good governance and safeguarding of the assets that voluntary organisations have. And in the main, those assets are people and volunteers and staff if organisations employ staff. So moving on to my next slide, this is going to bring us right here to Radyr and Morganstown, and a photograph that I took when I was walking around a few weeks ago to try and compose a few photographs for these PowerPoint slides, and near Forest Farm, and just trying to indicate part of the local area that most of us no doubt are familiar with. And the local area and the fact that we're in a meeting of the Radyr Morganstown Association brings us completely into that voluntary activity straight away. The RMA is set up as a society. It is therefore one of the 49,000 voluntary organisations in Wales that we name checked on the previous slide. The Radyr Morganstown Association is not a charity, as I understand it, but there are many charities active in Radyr. From the Radyr Comprehensive School Association, somebody's got his hand up. Nick,
we are a charity.
I beg your pardon, sorry, my research obviously failed me. Sorry about that, Nick. So the RMA is a charity then, one of the over 6,500 organisations that is registered with the Charity Commission for England and Wales, alongside many others in the locality, from the Radyr Community School Association to the Saltpeter Trust, and then to other names that will be recognised on a couple of slides that are coming up in just a moment, but not just yet. Another point that I wanted to make is that people of all ages volunteer. I'll talk about demographics in a little while as well, but obviously the variety of causes that link to the voluntary sector, from arts to the environment, from older people to younger people, to history societies, to music, and everything in between. And in my view, volunteering, community activity, whether linked to registered charities or not, are fundamental to that sense of community and sense of belonging, which is important to us today, but incredibly important to us for the future as well. So I'd now like to take us on to the next slide and briefly reflect on a building and a logo and a sign that many of us might be familiar with, the Radyr Scouts building on Hir Isaf, next door to the old school rooms. And young people being involved in community activity is incredibly important. And as with the next slide, thank you, Ian, the opportunity for people to volunteer in a way that suits them and is convenient to them and is comfortable to them. Now, different organisations welcome people from all backgrounds. Different organisations focus on working with women, working with girls, working with boys. It will be interesting later on to see how many people in the meeting this evening have come across the fairly new development of men's sheds, and how many people are actually involved in today's meeting in guiding or scouting. I'm hoping that a former colleague of mine who is involved in guiding might be on the call this evening and might be able to share some of her experiences and some of the opportunities that are presented through getting involved in voluntary activity from a young age. The next slide is one that again will be familiar to those of us who occasionally take a walk over the Taff, and is intended to just highlight the importance of community and voluntary activity around environmental causes that can be absolutely on our doorstep. Again, just in reference to the Radyr Chain newsletter that I received the other day, there is an article in there as regards the importance of protecting hedgehogs. There's a reference in relation to litter, the importance of people taking care of their environment, and preserving canals and rivers, and of course global sustainability is something that is important to us in this meeting and important to our children and grandchildren if we have them. And our next slide takes us on a slightly different tack that I just wanted to flag up to all of us who are thinking about volunteers and community activity, and thinking about that as something that is not part of a formal contract arrangement. And here we have the recently set up advert that Leonard Cheshire in Wales had outside the Dana Bryn Centre on Hir Isaf, that again I spotted when I was out taking photographs a few weeks ago. I'm not quite sure if it's still there now. They may have filled the vacancies that they were looking to fill. But the sector, the voluntary and charitable sector in Wales as an employer, is quite a substantial employer to consider. The sector employs around 10% of the workforce in Wales, and the largest numbers of staff are indeed employed in health and care, and then the arts and cultural industries. And of course, trustees who run charities have additional responsibilities when those charities employ staff. One of the favourite phrases that my trustee board use when they're talking about their responsibilities are a set of 5 S's. And of course, now because I want to remember all 5 of them, and I haven't got them as part of my notes, I may not remember them all, but the 5 S's that were name-checked in a regular basis on our board are the importance of a trustee board setting the strategy of the charity, of scrutinising the information of the charity and any staff or volunteers' reports that they might be presented, of being good stewards of any assets that that charity has, of supporting the staff, if the charity has staff, but supporting each other and supporting the volunteers that promote the aims of the charity. And now you see, I want the final S, I'm not managing it. Strategy, stewardship, stretch, I've got it. So it's a trustees board responsibility to always look to the future and think about what types of activity can they do, what types of plans can they put in place to stretch and move forward and not stand still, not basically stay in a rut. And trustees of charities where staff are involved have that additional responsibility, that duty of care as an employer. And of course, providing health and social care services, especially over the last 18 months, has been one of the most testing times for charity leaders and trustee boards that certainly I've been in conversation with. Now, lightening the mood just a moment, let's go to the next slide and see if anybody maybe wants to take their microphone off, if Ian will allow them, and shout out if anybody recognises where I took this photograph. Well, just to keep us on the timetable that we've set ourselves, this photo was taken outside the library in Radyr. And why did it catch my eye? Well, it's certainly colourful, I'm sure you'll agree. But if you look at the bottom of the photograph, which might be seen better, thank you very much indeed, Ian, on this slide, this shows a really interesting partnership in my view. It shows a partnership between a globally recognised brand, that panda logo of the World Wildlife Fund, that global charity, and also a charity that I must admit I might have come across before. I might have thought it was a government agency, but the Reading Agency. Now, working in partnership is really important and is becoming increasingly important for voluntary organisations and charities. As you'll recall from one of the earlier slides setting the context for Wales, there are over 6,000 registered charities in Wales, and then an additional 43,000 groups and associations who are constituted in different ways. And where charities have got a shared objective, in this case, encouraging literacy and a love of reading to try and instill a love of the environment from an early age, that partnership can really, really bring dividends. The next slide that Ian's going to kindly share shows some of the opportunities and challenges faced by volunteers and charities over the past year. So this photograph shows the notice board, lamppost notice board that the RMA often post things on outside a retail establishment on Radyr High Street. And it shows activities having been moved online from the spring of last year, and obviously this photograph was showing activities for just a couple of months ago. When lockdown arrived in March of 2020, many charities had to suspend fundraising overnight and pivot their focus completely online. And as I'm sure we all know and feel, online can work well for some of us, some of the time, but it does not work for everybody, and it certainly doesn't work all the time. But hopefully here, during the early part of May, a couple of months ago, there were opportunities for people to come together, albeit virtually, an opportunity to raise some funds for a very, very good cause, and also hopefully have some fun in the process when the quiz was held. And certainly I'm pretty sure that there are people in this evening's meeting who have lots of experience of supporting the Radyr and Morganstown Festival and of other events that the association support, like the Christmas stalls, the Christmas lights, other fundraising activities, and also local and international causes. There may be somebody in this evening's meeting who kindly gave me their experiences, not only of local charitable activity, but connections with organisations and good causes all over the world. And again, we may be able to make reference to those in a little while. So moving on to the next slide, I'm sure that this is also going to be a familiar image to everyone in this evening's meeting. The memorial on Hil Isaf. One of the first community events that we attended when we moved to Radyr a few years ago was the marking of Remembrance Day. And just for a moment, considering the number of volunteers and charities that are represented around the memorial when we are allowed to meet together, albeit in socially distanced ways, paying their respects, from the armed forces to cadets, to St. John Ambulance, to Scouts, and of course the guides. This next photograph of the Royal British Legion image of the poppy and the message in front of the War Memorial, which has those words, "Lest we forget," as well as, if you can spot it, the edge of the fairly new 20-mile-an-hour sign, emphasises for me the role that veterans charities play. For veterans of all ages and their families, from companionship to emergency funds, to skills development, housing, holidays, advice and information. Wales, unfortunately, has a very high rate of pensioner poverty, and veterans charities, alongside Age Cymru and the Citizens Advice Bureau network, help people claim money that they're entitled to, and they make a real impact on people's lives. Now, my next slide is going to take us from one aspect of age, one age profile, completely to another, because the next slide is a photograph of the board outside Radyr Primary School. And these words really chimed with me again when I was on my photographic journey around the locality a few weeks ago. And several of those words jumped out at me to link completely with voluntary and community activity. And those words were environment, happy, fun, safe, and inclusive. And that final word, inclusive, is one that I do want to come back to before I finish in a short while. And this next slide is an image that again really caught my eye. And this is underneath that notice board at Radyr Primary School. I didn't actually count the number of stones or painted pebbles that were at the side of Radyr Primary School, at the base of the notice board around the gates. But I have seen in a couple of different locations around South Wales and around the southwest of England, where my mum lives, a collection of coloured stones, possibly set by school children. And this one in particular, I thought was absolutely fantastic. An example in my mind, I don't know for sure, but I think of a school pupil doing something to say thank you to the NHS, and that sense of community and belonging and people looking out for each other that is such a major part of volunteering and community activity. And of course, the other thing that I thought was that it was absolutely great to see children getting involved and saying thank you in that way. So the point that I now want to move on to is just a reflection on demographics. And a couple of officers from the Radyr Morganstown Association and I were talking just immediately before this evening's meeting. And I think this link and connection between people's ages and people's life experiences is one that summarises beautifully the link between opportunities and challenges and the future. Lots of people volunteer when they retire, and that is absolutely fantastic. Some want to continue to be connected with something that they did during their work or their professional lives, whilst others want to do something completely different. And we need to attract and retain younger people and people from every background and every different type of life experience into community activity, whether that's as a school governor, whether that's as somebody involved with the Radyr Morganstown Association, whether that's as a fundraiser for 10 of Us Cancer Care, whether that's as somebody who wants to go and pick up litter once and once only. Everybody has got something to offer. And just as my final set of memories, I'd like to share with you a conversation that I had with some volunteers who were active with the Red Cross. And it was a conversation that I had actually when the National Ice Stepford was held in Cardiff a few years ago. And that setting, in my view, was an absolutely fantastic celebration of Welsh culture and Welsh life. It was open access, it was free to everybody. And I certainly made a point of wandering down every single alleyway and corridor in the open air in Cardiff Bay to chat with as many different people involved in voluntary activity and community activity. And one of the final stalls that I came to on this particular day near the Norwegian church was the Red Cross stand. And there were several people in the stand, several visitors, several conversations going on. And I happened to catch the eye of two women. And I said hello, we passed the time of day for a moment. And then I asked them if they minded if I asked them a question. And they said no, they didn't mind. And I asked them how they had got involved with the Red Cross. And the first woman answered, and she said, well, I used to be a nurse. When I retired, I wanted to stay involved in something linked to the NHS. And so I got involved with the Red Cross, and I've never looked back. I get involved with all sorts of fundraising activities. I'm still involved in some training activities. It's great fun, it's fantastic. And then I turned to her friend or her colleague, I didn't know which, and said, do you mind if I ask you the same question? And she looked at her feet for a moment, and then she looked up, and then she nudged her friend, and they had a smile between them. And she said, well, I got involved because she asked me. And I said, oh, right, okay. And she said, yes, I lost my husband a couple of years ago. And I was really, really down, obviously. And I had a few things that I was involved with, but nothing was giving me much fun, nothing was giving me much joy. And my friend asked if I wanted to come along to a coffee morning. No commitment, no pressure. She gave me a lift, we had a cup of coffee, and I found a really good sense of companionship. I met some new people as well as some people that I knew vaguely, and she said, and I've been coming along ever since. And it has given me a new lease of life, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. And that sense of being welcomed, that sense of knowing that every single one of us has got something to give, but that nobody is making any assumptions about how much time we've got, how much resources that we can give to a particular cause, but it might be something that we're passionate about, that we've had experience of before, but that we certainly want to have experiences with in the future. So my final slide this evening, before hopefully opening up a bit of a conversation, is a call to action to all of us, and a call to action maybe for the conversation that we'll have for the rest of this evening's meeting. Do you volunteer? What's your experience? Have you got any questions that you'd like to ask me, or have you got any questions that you want to ask of other people in this evening's meeting? Would you like to get involved, but you're not quite sure how? Here is one way that you might want to get involved. It's the Volunteering Wales portal, which is supported by Welsh Government, supported by every single county voluntary council active in every local authority across Wales, with whom WCVA works in partnership at a national level. So the links for the Volunteering Wales portal are there, the links to WCVA's website is there, and my work email is there. And if anybody would like to get in touch with me outside of this evening's meeting, I'd be delighted to hear from you, and obviously delighted to keep connected and communicating with colleagues in the Radyr Morganstown Association. And with that, David, I shall have a sip of my cold chamomile tea and see if there are any questions. And a big, big thank you to Ian for kindly supporting every technical aspect of this evening's presentation. Diolch yn fawr, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you very much, Ruth, for such an interesting talk. If I could just say, I think we have issues locally in Radyr and Morganstown. We have numbers of societies. Yeah, most of them, as you say, tend to be organised and run by older people, mostly retired people. Not all, but quite a lot. And the number of societies that we have are, in fact, some of them are actually dying. We've lost the gardening club, and there are others where they've only got a few older people now organising them. And it just seems that it is very difficult to try and get people, perhaps who have got younger families, younger children, to come along and get involved in anything. Now, the only thing I know where we do seem to find people is as a school governor with parents, and parents are very keen to get involved on school governing bodies. At least they are around here. I don't think it's the same perhaps in all of the rest of Cardiff, but around here there's never really a problem in finding them. I just wondered, from all the experience, is there anything you think we could be doing locally to try and get more people involved, especially younger people?
Yes, I've got a couple of ideas, but it would be really interesting, David. There may well be colleagues on the call who've got direct volunteer leadership experience working with younger people. And I don't know if any of them would like to chip in either now or in a moment, but the starting point would be, and especially if there are colleagues on the call who are governors, like you've described, or who are parents or grandparents of school children, is actually getting a session going with school pupils or high school students, college students themselves, and saying, what would you find interesting? What would attract you? And doing that possibly with some technical support, linked to the social media platforms that the association uses, possibly in conjunction with the school, possibly just standing outside the co-op at the lunchtime and striking up a few conversations with people would be interesting. But I don't know if there are colleagues who are happy to come off the microphone and share their experiences, some of the leadership of youth social action activities that might be on the call. I don't know if that would be okay.
Yeah. Is there anybody that wishes to say anything?
Ruth,
No?
do you want me to jump in quickly and just talk about my experience with working with young people as volunteers? Would that help? Yeah, okay. So I think I know most people on the call, but I'm Harrod. I'm Ian's wife. We're sat in opposite sides of the house at the moment. But I've been involved with girl guiding for 11 years now. So I started volunteering with guides when I was 26. And over the last 11 years, I'm on a bit of a break at the moment, but I've supported young people in becoming young leaders and also supported the Welsh Baccalaureate requirements around volunteering as well. We've been very lucky, obviously, as a youth organisation to be able to allow our young members to come back as young leaders and to support brownie units and rainbow units. But we've also used our connections, sort of our professional connections, to put a lot of our guides in touch with organisations that they may have an interest in, and to set out roles for them that they can that use their skills that they've already got, that helps them build confidence, but that also utilises the time they've got. So they may only have a couple of hours a week, but by working with the other youth leaders or just working with the young people themselves, we've been able to carve out roles where they feel they can give their best, but they also know exactly what's required of them. Because even though I suppose a lot of young people do tend to be quite opinionated, they are still very, very shy. They need a lot of support in growing in confidence and growing in their roles. So we've been able to get more young people involved in our organisations and in wider organisations across Cardiff by just thinking about exactly what we can offer to a young person of that age with a limited amount of time, and communicating it clearly with them, but also supporting them every time they turn up and having a chat and ask them how things are going. So I think that's my experience of it, Ruth.
That's really interesting. It's lovely to see you, Harrod. Thanks. But the one of the other things that struck me was when we had the slide up earlier on with the photograph of the River Taff and the importance that so many young people place on issues around around the climate crisis and nature emergency and preserving the planet. And I think that the opportunities around, whether that's around wildlife or around the environment, are also issues. I don't know, I know that there are, an active group of litter pickers in the area, and whether those activities take place at a time when young people would be able to join in, outside of, school time or study time. And as Harrod said, that opportunity to just dip in and out, that half an hour here or there, or an hour here or there, and with no long-term commitment is something that an awful lot of people will do. And if I had £1 for every time that somebody said to me, when answering the question, what got you involved, 9 times out of 10, it's somebody said, oh, somebody asked me. And somebody just asked me to do something that is fairly, time constrained. It wasn't going to be coming to a meeting every week of the year for the next 10 years. It wasn't requiring huge responsibility or a huge amount of time, and certainly not requiring amounts of resources to be expended, but something that's manageable, something that's bite-sized. And Sport Cymru, Sport Wales, Sports Council for Wales have had a phrase, I don't know if they still use it, but get a young person hooked on sport and you get them hooked for life. And I certainly think that getting young people involved in Scouts or in Guides or as in St John or as somebody passionate about the environment or passionate about animal welfare, and you'll usually capture them forever. They might change causes as they grow up and their life experience changes, but usually they will stay involved in some way, shape or form. I don't know.
I would just add, if I may, that I think David's point is a very strong one. It's really, really difficult for organisations that depend upon the old faithfuls then to recruit new people. I have a few years back resigned from something not in Radyr but elsewhere in Cardiff, simply because I knew that young people walking in and seeing a room full of old geezers like me would turn around and go back again. Your point that it's actually important that each of us somehow or other needs to recruit a younger person, to invite someone younger to join in, and without that commitment that makes them feel as if they've been tied down. But it's really hard because many young people today, more than probably in our generation when we were 30 or 40 years younger, more of those people are in needing 2 incomes to support a family, are working long and often irregular hours, or working in ways which make evening commitments very difficult, and so on. And so it is a very serious problem.
I quite agree, Colin. It's lovely to see you. Hiya, Helen. I completely agree with you. But then, is that then an opportunity for all of us to think about what types of opportunities are we talking about, and should, in actual fact, the way in which people get involved be not exactly turned on its head, because you don't need to chuck the baby out with the bathwater, but to say, well, are there different ways of doing things? So, for example, we commented earlier as regards how the world had to sort of pivot last spring and operate through Zoom, through Teams, through Skype, through WebEx, through goodness knows how many other platforms there are, and that being more inclusive and providing greater opportunities for different people to be involved in different ways. But it also, in terms of a challenge, it really dialed up the different inequalities that exist across the world. You only have to see from the number of sort of media coverages as regards how many people were trying to do school homework on a parent's mobile phone, and if there's more than 1, 2 or 3 children and they're all trying to use one parent's mobile phone to keep up with schoolwork, it's hardly surprising that those inequalities, in education with just one lens, have really been really difficult. But I remember one of the conversations that I had with the chief exec of the Merched Dawal organisation last summer was that she said that the phone, in her view, had come into its own. And I said, that's interesting, Tegwin. I said, in what experience? She said, well, quite a lot of the people that we work with have not got a computer, have not got a mobile phone. They're operating off the landline, and actually phoning somebody up for a chat was the thing that really was a complete joy and opportunity for that women's charity to do. It was something that everybody could do, and they actually engaged more members and encouraged younger people to say, what can you do? What can you do? Oh, I can phone somebody up, and I can phone somebody maybe using my mobile phone, but I'm phoning their landline. And the feedback then that the charity had as regards feeling that somebody cared and somebody was looking out for them, on the other end of the phone, possibly the other end of the country, was really, really helpful. So I think there's that opportunity to ask somebody if they want to get involved and trying to see if we can be flexible with that. But it's also looking for different ways to involve people and taking other people's ideas as regards, so what would you like to do? What do you think would make a difference? And of course, final comment, sorry, David, I've just remembered from a care setting, because I spoke about the sector being an employer of 10% of the Welsh workforce, and the majority of those employees being involved in health and care or in arts and cultural industries. And I was in a care setting a couple of years ago in Swansea that had been established by two social workers who'd finished up their jobs as social workers for the local authority, had put some of their own money in and got a bank loan to purchase a premises to provide accommodation for people aged care leavers, leaving foster care at the age of 16, arriving at this setting with carrier bags or a black bin liner with all their world's possessions in, needing somewhere to stay. And having the chance to have a chat to a couple of the care leavers who were the first residents in this particular care setting. And a bit of a chat, talking about all sorts of things. And then one of the young people just looking me straight in the eye said, "Do you know what the difference is about this place?" And I said, "No," in terms of other settings and other facilities, other services that they'd had access to over many years. And she said, "It's because there are people here who don't have to be here. It's not their job. There are volunteers associated with this service who are doing this either because they've got that lived experience, they've had that care, they've lived in care themselves. They're not doing this for their job. They're doing this because they want to be here." And of course, professional staff, be they in the NHS, in education, in social care, are essential. People with those skills and qualifications and who have gone through DBS checks, criminal record bureau checks, and so on. But people who are doing stuff because they're passionate about it, or possibly because they're angry about stuff and they want to change things, really do move mountains and mean something to people who are possibly in very, very different sets of circumstances to possibly some of us on this evening's call at the moment. And we all know, I mean, just go back to that memorial sign and the poppy logo in front of the memorial on Elisnath. We all know that things can change just like that in people's lives. And having volunteers and charities and community organisations around to support is something that I'm sure none of us take for granted, but occasionally saying thank you to people goes a long way as well. So I know that there are people on this call who are active volunteers and active in our community. So a big, big thank you from me to all of you and them. And again, I'll put myself on mute because David's probably thinking, when's she going to stop talking in a minute? So.
No, please, if there's anything else you wish to say, do continue. Nick, you have a question or some comment?
Well, just a comment. I mean, just to bring sort of three themes together, which I think, sorry, I'm not trying to summarise your talk, Ruth, but one of the reasons that we were delighted to invite you to give this talk is because, as David Silver said, we're looking across what the association does and the organisations that we support within Radyr Morganstown, and we find they are atrophying. But the three things I bring together is to have a cause in the first place. The people aren't going to volunteer for something which they don't feel, as you said, passionate about. And the question is, from an association point of view, we are an umbrella organisation. We don't try to do all things ourselves. We hope we establish other groups to do it. But we would like to find those things which other people want to do and want to contribute to. Secondly, it is, as you said, to find ways in which people contribute to those causes which do not cause them grief or too much overhead. And they may well grow into the post. And the third thing, of course, is to make the whole damn thing fun whilst you do it. And those are the three things which I think that we're a bit struggling with, in the sense that, are the causes that we are focusing on from the association, are they the right ones? Are there people who think that we ought to be, particularly younger people, we ought to be focusing in other ways? We'd like them to tell us. And in that case, we might then be able to ask the people to get involved and actually make fun out of it. And although we're getting old and, whiskery and all sorts of bits and pieces, we do sort of get fun out of what we do.
Brilliant. Well done, Nick. Yeah. I mean, certainly, just with the Radyr chain that's been delivered over the last couple of days and the opportunity for different conversations that might happen, you know, whether you know, who's going to go on the visit to the quarry, who's going to be the next person to stick their hand up to say, I'll do some litter picking, who's going to go to the concert in the park, who's going to go to the vintage tractor festival. You know, if my dad was still with me, he'd be dragging me down there, that's for sure. But all of those different things will have different people, some of whom will know and care about RMA, and some of whom will say, RMA, who's that? What's that? That's not for me. Well, actually, yes, it is. It was one of the things that attracted my husband and I to the area, thinking, oh, right, there's this association, you know, oh, there's a cinema club. How many cushions do you need to take to be comfortable on the chairs watching the films? You know, oh, they sell ice cream and you can take a little bottle of wine with you. What's not to like? But the conversations with people in those settings, even if we don't know many people, some of us in this meeting this evening will know people under the age of 50, 40, 30, 25, 20, teenagers, school children and so on, because some of us will be parents and grandparents, but some of us won't be. And having those conversations as regards, well, what would get you involved then? What would attract you? We can all chat to somebody. And then we'd all be able to reflect and feed in, you know, what we heard. It might help us, it might not, but if we don't ask, we're not going to find out. I suppose that's one of the things that I've been thinking about since having met one of the officers of the association on a walk around Radyr a few months ago, as regards having the opportunity to get introduced to this idea of doing a talk, that having that conversation is something that would be good to do. And the opportunity, of course, for people who have got lots of different life experience to actually link across with younger people and be those mentors, people to share experiences from whatever part of life, is something that certainly when I was at the Older People's Commission was referred to as intergenerational activity. And a lot of young people live away from grandparents or people who could be those positive role models. If there's Radyr Morganstown, in my view, is rich in many, many ways. We live in a fantastic part of South Wales, and many of us have got resources, possibly more than we need. And being able to share those and talk about our experiences with other people and be a friend to other people and be a positive role model to other people is something that I believe we've all got the potential for, and is something that would be hugely valued, I'm sure, by lots of different people. Might sound a bit motherhood and apple pie as a sort of closing set of comments, but it's heartfelt.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they wish to add? Simon?
Well, just a little comment, Ruth. One of the, we have been talking about the volunteering world, looking particularly at younger people. But for those of us who are on this call, most of us have had quite a lot of life experiences at a fairly senior level. And I think a lot of people who are around sort of later period of life, as it were, have potentially a lot to offer in perhaps a slightly different way. I mean, I myself have been a trustee of a number of charities, including Leonard Cheshire International, for example, and others. And one can bring experiences to bear to challenge people in a sort of professional sense, particularly officers of charities who are often looking desperately for help from outside the normal realms of professional activity. And I think that a lot of people underestimate the interest that we ourselves could have as trustees of charities. And I know a lot of charities are always looking for trustees. And trustees can challenge, they can they can make sure that all of the sort of processes that are being taken on board by the charity are up to speed and that sort of thing. Quite a complicated job, in fact, and often the reward of being a trustee of a charity, even as a small charity, is very considerable. So I think we should be thinking of volunteering not just as encouraging younger people, but encouraging those of us who have got some life experiences to get back into the fold, to contribute to board processes, to challenge and to engage with people who are actually doing the nitty-gritty hard work of delivery of a charitable service.
Absolutely spot on, Simon, absolutely spot on. And I think that the role that trustees play, I mean, obviously, and with the experience that you've just quoted, are things that voluntary organisations and charities are calling out for. I mean, I mentioned that we launched our search for trustees as part of our annual cycle of nominations and elections today, and the particular skill sets that we're keen to reach out for at this particular moment in time, giving the sort of skills mix across our trustee board, includes legal skills and also data and digital in terms of an eye to the future. But you're absolutely right. The best boards are the boards that have got a mixture of people on them, with people with professional expertise, and also people who are keen to learn and to want to use that experience as part of their own career development. But I also think it's interesting that quite a few people get involved with trustee boards that may be similar to their professional experience and their working lives, and some want to just do something completely different. And having that opportunity and having that range of voluntary organisations, as I say, from the arts to the environment, to children, to younger people, and back again. The sector is so diverse. There are so many different opportunities. And of course, the responsibilities that rest on trustees' shoulders as the stewards of the organisation, with legal responsibilities linked to the Charity Commission, are ones that need to be taken seriously and need to be and people need to go in with their eyes open, because things can go wrong and do go wrong, but the opportunity for trustees to support each other and and ask other people, do you want to come along, do you want to observe a meeting? It suits some people, it doesn't suit others. Some people want to get stuck in with fundraising, some people want to get stuck in with doing other things, and other people are very pleased to be approached to be trustees and take on those types of responsibilities and so on. And room for everybody, I suppose, is the message. But very interesting to know that you've had that international experience with Leonard Cheshire. I bet that was exciting.
Yes, in fact it was, and it did. I mean, with Leonard, I was a trustee of Leonard Cheshire UK, but that's part of the bigger family. And indeed, I did on one occasion visit Leonard Cheshire services in the Philippines. I had a regular sort of attraction to the Philippines because I used to be a keen scuba diver. So when I was on one of my scuba diving trips, I visited the Leonard Cheshire service in the Philippines, and the way in which they were making do and mend and inventing ways of supporting people with disabilities was just incredible, and it was just an almost life-affirming experience to see people struggling in that sort of way. But yeah, it was a very interesting role, and certainly one that I very much appreciated being able to experience some of the problems that we see elsewhere in the world, as well as the UK, because obviously my main role was vice chairman of the UK board for a number of years.
With your permission, you've given me a lovely line for a tweet after this evening's meeting, because something along the lines of, from scuba diving, sustainable development to scouts and guides, it's all going on in the RMA, or some words to that effect. So with your permission, I might use that scuba diving link to talk about later. But David, Nick, thank you very much indeed. I think I've bust your time frame a bit for the meeting. I'm going to put myself on mute again. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you very much. There don't seem to be any other questions. So could I once again thank you very much, Ruth, for such an interesting talk. I'm sure people are going to go away from this and think very carefully about what you've said and see if there is perhaps anything else they can do. Now, I think a lot of the people who are here are obviously quite heavily involved in volunteering at present anyway. But I think everybody will perhaps have another thought to see if there's anything else they can do. So thank you very much for such an interesting talk. Thank you.
And David, if I can just jump in and do my usual GDPR bit that I omitted at the beginning, and before I get my wrist slapped, just to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded, and Ruth's talk will be available from the RMA website later on this week. Give me a couple of days to process it, please. So if you've been really interested by what Ruth has said and want to share her messages with others, please do share that link to our website when we circulate it to everybody.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, in that case, we'll carry on with the rest of the meeting. The first item is the minutes of the last meeting. The minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 28th of June. We had a very interesting talk by Ian Ogden on LionAid. We have the Treasurer's report, which we're going to get a new one tonight anyway. An update on the festival, where we're going to have another update. Transport for Wales, which I think will be coming up with planning. So I don't think there were any matters arising, unless anybody else has got any. Okay, we'll carry on then. David, Treasurer's report.
Right, well, as we're all aware, very little activity this year, but we have raised something like £3,000 in income, of which there were donations to 10 of us of 2,278. So we have actually spent something like £100 expenditure over income this year. So the bank balance has gone from 8,172 down to 8,071 or thereabouts, but it's still very healthy. And obviously we will need funds for the coming autumn festival. I don't think there's anything of any significance in terms of our expenditure. They're all very minor things like insurance and website costs. So quite normal, but obviously we're looking into the future for more income and probably more expenditure.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions for David? Okay, if I can briefly then mention the September festival. As you know, we lost the festival last year due to the pandemic. We had an online festival back in May, and we were really hoping that we could have a much fuller festival in September. Unfortunately, things didn't quite work out as well as we hoped. There was a delay when the Welsh government said we were going to carry on and have another 3 weeks to get more people vaccinated before we moved down to level 0. And then I think the announcements when we moved down, unlike England, where I think they just said there will be no restrictions, we ended up in the situation when we were having to put in risk assessments to say what we were going to do to ensure that we were not going to pass COVID around. And basically that left us in a position where we felt there was no way we could run quite a number of our events. Basically, I mean, we have concerts like we have a concert in the Methodist Hall and everybody sits theatre style right next to each other with rows and rows of people. Well, there's obviously no way we could deal with that with COVID. So unfortunately, a lot of our indoor events we decided we couldn't do, because if we did do things and carried on with some sort of social distancing, the events were just not going to be viable and we were just going to make a loss on every event. So what we've done, we put together, which we hope is still an exciting program, with quite a few large events and fewer larger events. So we're starting on September the 11th with a summer show. This is something that hasn't been done for a number of years, but it's going to be at Morganstown Village Hall. As people have said, there's quite a bit about it in the Radyr chain, and it's also on the back of the festival program, which comes in the Radyr chain. So please have a look at this, and please do come along. There's a quarry walk the following day, and if people want to go on that, they need to contact Alan Cook, and there are details of how to do that. There's a civic service on the Sunday evening. Then we've got a few events for younger children, which the library put on Tuesday and Wednesday of each week. On the Thursday, on the 16th, there is the 10 of us quiz. Now, again, this for similar reasons is going to be held on Zoom, the same as we did back in May. And I'm sure Roseanne is looking for more teams and for more people to carry on, because obviously the more people you get, there is no limit when you have a Zoom meeting, whereas there is a physical limit in the new school rooms. So if anybody's interested, please contact Roseanne on that. On Sunday the 19th, we've got the Festival Dog Show, Tractor Show, and Fate all combined together. And we're holding this in Lichgate Gardens. We've already got quite a number of stalls coming along. The vintage tractors will be there, and the dog show is going to start at 2. We are hoping to have a Punch and Judy man there to keep the younger children entertained from when it starts up until 2 o'clock, when the dogs start to do their thing. So again, please do come along. There will be a barbecue and a bar, so you can sit there and enjoy yourselves and have a burger or a hot dog and a few glasses of wine maybe, or a beer, because we're expecting most people probably to walk to that event. The final big event we're organising is the concert in the park, and this we believe we can carry on as normal. It's free to everybody, and it's in the play area in Park Radyr from 12 noon till 6 o'clock in the evening. There'll be again a barbecue and a bar. People can come along, picnic or do what they like, and it should be a very good afternoon. I know normally we have many hundreds of people there. And then on the last day, the Sunday, there is a walk organised by 10 of us and Alan Cook in the afternoon, followed by an afternoon tea, which is being organised. And again, details are in the programme. If you haven't seen the programme, you can always look it up on the festival website. So that's really what's going on. There is also one more thing. There's a treasure hunt which is being put on by I think it's the guides, and that is carrying on over the whole of the festival. So hopefully we've got something there that everybody can join in. It may not be the full sort of program that we normally have, but you know, we've got as many things as we can. Please buy some raffle tickets as well. The draw for the raffle will be carried out on the Sunday afternoon at the 10 of us tea. Okay, so I don't know if anybody has any questions. If not,
just to say that there is space for, if anybody's got any ideas for further stalls, then please get in touch with me. We're doing quite well, but the area that we've got down on Lichgate Gardens, which, if you don't know where it is, at the sidings area, is really quite large, and it'd be lovely to fill it up more than we have at the present time.
And just to say, the Alzheimer's group may well put cheese on for the summer show. They're thinking about it at the moment.
okay. Planning. Ian, are you?
That's me. He's got to talk about planning, isn't it?
Yes,
so
yes.
It feels like an awfully long time, or an awful lot's happened in terms of planning since we last formally met as the association. So it remains for me to remember all of these things and let you know what's going on. The Cardiff local development plan we talked about quite a bit the last time that we met as an association. That is moving on at the usual county council sort of a pace. Nothing. Can you let us know what's happening tomorrow? we have, as an association, on your behalf, completed a submission on the draft vision for a new local development plan for Cardiff. Basically drawing together all of those thoughts that you, our membership, have already expressed to the Radyr Morganstown executive about things like active travel routes, about buses needing to run late enough into the evening if we're going to go and use the facilities within the city centre, about things like Place d'Or needing to have their bus routes in them before people move in, and the facilities that have been promised for those new residents actually existing so that they don't utilise the existing ones and take away things like school places and library facilities from us who already live here as new residents move into the area. I won't précis the entire few thousand words that we submitted on your behalf. If you do want to read the full submission from the RMA, that is now on our website. And as with all these things, we now await the next round of a draft something or other to come from the relevant council officers for us to trawl through and draw together comments, and we will let you know through our usual channels as soon as that something to peruse is available, and we'll seek your comments as a membership organisation to submit those views. So that's my first one. The normal tick of planning applications are going on, and your RMA exec are keeping an eye on what is coming through. The most interesting ones of those to tell you about are the bridge over the railway at Glynnis Farm. This went to planning committee, it was nearly 2 weeks ago now. And whilst it took the meeting quite a while to get through the business, it was accepted as drafted. So there will be a new large road and pedestrian bridge over the railway at Glynnis Farm. There are a large number of caveats that the council have put on that planning permission being utilised, but unfortunately it was not done in such a way that the caveats had to be brought back to planning committee before it was granted. So the planning permission has been granted, but it is subject to a suitable traffic management plan, whatever that means, being in place before work starts. On that, Transport for Wales have not told us, but have put out a newsletter today stating that there'll be a drop-in on Wednesday, the 8th of September at Morganstown Village Hall. We've heard around the houses in time for tonight's meeting to share that date with you, that there is a drop-in at Morganstown Village Hall on Wednesday, the 8th of September, to talk about their work in Morganstown, in the Mound Field in Morganstown, and the bridge over the railway at Morganstown. The RMA have, since in between the planning consent being drafted and tonight's meeting, have submitted a letter to Transport for Wales, to our contacts there, asking them to share with us directly the information and to tell us what is going on, what they are planning to do, and to consult with us regarding their intended traffic management plan to get vehicles to and from site, etc. They apparently have consulted with local stakeholders, but we're not quite sure who those are, given that they don't appear to have consulted with either the RMA or the Morganstown Residents Group. I've been consulting with them as well, so that we make sure that both of us know what the other one's been mentioning. Neither of us seem to have been consulted on this plan yet, so we're not quite sure which groups they have consulted with. We are endeavouring to find out. Are there any other planning matters that I've forgotten? Those were my two big ones, I think.
Can I just say, in the drop-in session is from 2 o'clock until 7 o'clock in the
yes.
evening. So.
And it is a true drop-in. Even in these times of COVID, you can just wander along. It is not one that you have to book for any longer. It is a physical in-person at Morganstown Village Hall session. If we do get word of any others, we will share anything else that we find out about those. So the other, moving off my strict planning remit, the other thing to share with everyone is that there are roadworks coming, because that's my other hobby horse, as many of you will know. After planning comes roadworks. For those of you that regularly travel through Taffs Well, from the 23rd of August, you will not be able to drive from this side to Taftswell station, as the railway works at Taftswell are being undertaken to put a new track underneath the access road to get into the new train servicing depot at Taftswell. So the 23rd itself, you won't be able to get into Taftswell from this side. From the 23rd on, from 24th onwards, the main road will be open. You'll still be able to drive through Taftswell, but to get to Taftswell station, you'll have to go up through Taftswell and come back at it from the other side. The access into the station and the industrial estate there will be closed. So that's the roadworks on, that's on the left-hand side of us, the Taftswell side of us. On the Place d'Our side of us, we're now pinned in by roadworks, as works are happening by the garage to add the entrance to what's on the left as you head into Cardiff. I'm not quite sure which bit of the Place d'Our estate they're calling that one, but the one that kind of bolts onto the back of Danes Court. So that entrance is currently being built on the into Cardiff side. On the out of Cardiff side, there are roadworks now happening on the Radyr on the next roundabout as you head out towards Llantrisant. Park Radyr roundabout, that's the one that I'm talking about, and those involve traffic lights sort of overriding the roundabout and making it a road with traffic lights on for some of the time, and my understanding is that those traffic lights will come and go as required as they work on the various sides of what is currently a roundabout to turn it into another fully signalled junction like we have at the end of Radyr.
Can I just mention the layout there, that we've got this petition going to the County Council at the end of September. The petition at the current time is now 283 residents, and hopefully that will grow with the distribution of Radyr chain. Talking about the mini roundabout and the junction there, I drove up into the estate the other night. The road link to the main access to the estate is not built yet and is unlikely to be built for some time. So there are 70 houses there coming out onto that mini roundabout at the present time. And Radyr are saying, well, that's going to be our access. Well, let's hope not. So if you haven't signed the petition and you wish to, there's reference to it in the Radyr chain. You're muted, David.
I know, I haven't said anything. I was trying to unmute, so. Thank you, Ian. Next item is Christmas lighting. The Christmas lighting this year is going to be on the 3rd of December. I've heard from Hugh in the Community Council where I think they're planning to do things much as they did last year. We will be talking to our next charity, who are Headway, and to look at how and who will switch the lights on. But there'll be more details on that later on. Okay, any other business? Has anybody got anything they wish to raise?
Oh, David, it wouldn't be one of these meetings if I didn't say bins, would it?
No.
So I need to make everybody aware, the latest we have from Cardiff Council is we'll wait and see. So green bins, I understand everyone should have now been collected for the most recent green bin collection that was overdue from last week and got postponed and postponed. That, I understand, should now have been completed. We are not currently. Yes,
can I jump in there? They are they are not collecting from Old Garden Court, and they haven't collected again this time. Not all the bins have been collected.
Marvellous. So they should have been collected, I understand, but we'll deal with those odd little outliers that have been missed again. The bad news is we don't know when the next green bin collection will be. We are expecting that it will go to monthly from now on, and we are likely to have had our last August one. We are not officially saying that the 24th of August isn't happening, but the word from the council is not to expect it to happen, and that we will get a date for a monthly collection for September and October, possibly. But again, don't count your chickens for an October one, because we will then go into the winter schedule where we will not get collections at all for garden waste over the winter. So I bearer of bad news on that one, I'm afraid. I'm giving as much information as we have from Cardiff Council. We are actively badgering Cardiff Council for longer range information as soon as is possible, and are petitioning that it's not really an appropriate level of service. Equally, as I've said in other items, as soon as we have more information on these vital things of local importance, we will share that information with our membership.
Ian, Cardiff Council have put out a release which basically said that this collection they're doing now will be the last one until the autumn. So there will not be another collection in August. And when the autumn is, I have no idea. I just thought autumn was probably September, but it may be October. I don't know.
We've actively asked that. We've actively asked that question as well, David. Yeah. We're not leaving it to the press releases. We have pushed the relevant officers at the council for some more concrete information.
Yeah. Okay. Has anybody else got anything? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming along tonight. Thanks once again to Ruth for such an excellent talk. The date of our next meeting is Monday, the 22nd of November, and we will have a speaker from the charity Headway, who are our next charity for the basically starting after the end of this festival. So when we start, they will actually be our charity for, and I don't know, it's not quite a year now because, of course, we lost part of the year this year. So thank you all very, very much. Thank you.